presentation.
Well, thank you, Caroline.
Yep.
Next, we're going to be joined by two presenters from George Mason University. Becky Klein, Associate Director, Purchasing Operations, has over 21 years of higher education administration and management experience, including 6+ years at George Mason. Becky is the pilot manager of all purchasing processes, and the pilot RPA for Mason Physical Services are among her responsibilities. Joining Becky is her colleague, Brandon Winfield. Brandon is the office coordinator for purchasing and accounts payable department. He is a graduate of Mason, way to go, and he is intimately involved in the workings of RPA. So I'll throw it over to you guys.
Hi, thank you everybody for inviting us and giving us yet another opportunity to share the fact that we had the initial pilot here of RPA for Mason Fiscal Services. Brandon, you want to share a slide here? So Mason's where we started was that Mason's Fiscal Services had been contemplating starting somewhere with using RPA. We had actually had opportunities at other conferences that we had attended where other Virginia University financial institutions was already using RPA, and we could see that it was worth investigating for our own use. So Fiscal Services worked with the ITS Program Management Office, and they proposed one project to be selected from 3 projects to be the initial pilot. So purchasing, student accounts, and general accounting all created a proposal, and each group met with ITS to determine which project would be selected for the pilot. Since I already have experience bridging that gap by doing process improvement for purchasing an AP, I actually reached out to the PMO office and said, listen, what's the criteria that you really are looking for, so that I could review all the processes that we have in place to see which one would possibly apply. So, and in addition to that, Fiscal Services senior leadership wanted to ease people's, and I'm talking about the staff's, feelings about what the real purposes were for RPA. So they actually, in an all hands meeting with staff, actually, we held a little seminar just talking about the adoption of this technology. We didn't want people to feel like they were just going to bring in a bunch of bots and replace the human interaction. Instead, it would be more for use of those mundane and really tasks that, you know, that has to be done on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please, Brandon. So here is the criteria that we were given, the UiPath criteria. They wanted us for the first initial RPA to pick something that's between a low and a medium complexity. It talks about, you know, the number of applications that it touches, the number of potential fields or screens or just various scenarios. And so I reviewed this criteria and I decided that I would pick our vendor submission to the Cardinal Vendor Group via web portal was the right one. So after ITS reviewed all 3 proposals, our Cardinal Vendor Submission project was the one that was selected, and we created our working group. And so our working group consisted of my colleague Brandon. We worked with the Amplitude 9 people, and of course, we had consultants from ITS. Next slide, Brandon. So when we're going to talk about, you know, our design and implementation, first we had to look at, as Mike had alluded to before, about how you actually take a manual process and you have to convert it into, a technical solution. So first we looked at our existing manual business process for how we have to submit vendors to Cardinal. And Cardinal is the financial application that's used by the Commonwealth of Virginia. We actually modified our existing process and did a few tweaks. We used our basic report. It's an Excel report for the bot to use that information from that report to actually fill out the web form. And how that works is we have to, every vendor that we create, and I'm talking about people who we're going to pay from Mason, we actually have to mirror that in the Cardinal system for the Commonwealth. So the way they've given that to us, we do approximately between 50 and 100 vendors a week that we actually create. So they gave us this process where we actually had to fill out the form for one per vendor. And it was it was a painful process, I have to say. So ITS created a virtual machine and they granted us access. And then the Amplitude 9 architects went to work designing based upon the new business model that we had put into place. There were many different factors that decided on how we were going to create this backend process. Other things to consider when establishing an enterprise-wide process involving RPA is you need a developing security and architecture policies, establish a review committee for RPA development consideration. These are things that we had to talk about, like, okay, so we've done the initial pilot. How are we going to launch pilots or launch other RPAs moving forward? So once we did complete the process, we created a test plan, and Brandon, my colleague, did all the appropriate tests. This was a challenge to us since we didn't have a test environment to work with for the Commonwealth web form. But once we did complete all the testing, we did also put procedures in writing so that we could use it as a training tool in the future. We did have a procedure in place to ensure that nothing was submitted in error during our test phase. So that way nothing got submitted to the Commonwealth that wasn't supposed to. So, like I said, we developed a written procedure guide. We trained other staff. And I would say it only took us about 6 months from start to finish to completely roll out this RPA to our production environment. Next slide. So here is my colleague, Brandon Wingfield, and he'll give you a brief explanation and a sample of the bot's functionality. Brandon?
So the start of the process, we get an Excel spreadsheet that's generated weekly. That spreadsheet contains information over just about all the vendors that we onboarded within the past week. Before the bot even really touches that spreadsheet, I go in and I remove our foreign vendors as well as any business entities. And then once that is done, I place the spreadsheet in a specific folder that allows the bot to read and review it. The bot will take that spreadsheet and compare it to a spreadsheet from the previous week to go ahead and just duplicate to eliminate any duplicate entries. And that way we don't get any error messages when we have to submit this to the Department of Accounts. Once that is done, the bot will pull the info from the spreadsheet and it will begin filling out the vendor maintenance request forms, as you can see it's doing now in the video. And then once that is done, it will also attach the W-9s to the respective forms, and then it will submit them for review and approval.
Okay, so where are we at now? So although I can't really, attach a cost savings to this, I can say it used to take us about 8 hours for Brandon to manually fill out this form, and that included, fixing all the human errors not saying that Brandon did a lot of human errors, but there are typographical errors, just sheer based upon the volume here. But we were able to reduce the time frame of actually running the bot from 8 hours to less than an hour. And this has to be done weekly. So 50 weeks out of the year, we run this bot process. So we did, after we rolled it into production, we did make a few tweaks to the application and fix some very small functionalities. And so I would say the bot is running very effectively. And so because of this, this has given us opportunities to use our labor resources in really other critical areas. So what's next for Mason? So I'm sure the other two departments that weren't picked are anxious to have their submitted proposals reviewed and possibly considered. And in addition, business services, our GMU's fiscal services has slated about 40 different processes that we believe that we can leverage and use the RPA process for. And overall, I couldn't tell you that we couldn't be happier with the process, and I can really see how this could benefit our department as well as the Mason community in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky and Brandon. I noticed some chat questions. Did any of them apply to George Mason?
Yeah, I can address that if you want me to,
Okay,
David.
why don't you do
Yeah,
that? 'Cause
just
kinda
quickly,
keeps-
Becky. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. We give everybody a chance to answer a question. So this is from Michael Asaro, and he was wondering if it takes an hour of labor to run the bot, or it takes an hour for the bot to run unattended, Becky. Thank you.
I would probably say, I mean, Brandon could correct me, but it probably only takes about 10 minutes of his, because there's two different types of bots. You can either run them manned or unmanned. And because this particular bot had to run on a system that wasn't controlled by Mason, and that means we actually have to log into the Commonwealth of Virginia's web page. So this is actually what we call a manned bot. So once Brandon does his initial work of 5 or 10 minutes, then the bot takes approximately up to an hour, depending the size of the file, to complete the process. So I would say 5 to 10 minutes of Brandon's time, and the rest is just the bot's automation running.
Thank you, David. I think we can move to the next
Okay,
guest
so
speaker.
let's thank you guys very much. I think that's really insightful and useful. And as an economist, we always need to think about, to Becky's point, we are now able to use saved labor costs and apply it to higher value priorities of the institution, rather than, in this case, Brandon, like doing all this stuff. We maybe can apply his job and other people's jobs to really approaching how do we reward how do we establish greater student experiences at Mason, which I know we're really focused on. So let's